Hey, this is Doug Davidoff here. I am filling in for our producer, Hannah Munoz. Hannah is going to be out for the next several episodes. Yep, she gave birth. She had a beautiful, beautiful baby boy. So, Hannah, I got this covered for you. We'll keep the house under order. Jess and I will try to clean up before you get back from the parties that we have. But for those of you listening to this episode of the RevOps Show, it's one of my favorite topics. Jess digs in with me about sales pipelines. We talk about some of the biggest mistakes that get made with pipelines, what is the same about every pipeline, how to know whether or not you should have more than one pipeline, and what you should do to have a clear, solid pipeline to drive sales outcomes and sales results. It's a fun episode. Jess is back from vacation. Hannah is off on maternity leave. Doug Davidoff, have been here stuck in the heat and humidity, keeping the trains rolling. Let's jump into the RevOps Show. Jess, you look rested, ready. You're back.
I couldn't hear any music.
You couldn't hear any music. Well, if the music didn't come through, Jess, then we will add it to we'll add it in post production.
Okay, fine.
But you're back. You look rested. You look ready.
I'm back. The beach was amazing. There was sand. There was water. There was alcohol. It checked all the boxes.
I heard it's hot down there.
In Texas, it is. It's hotter in San Antonio than it was at the coast, though. So, go figure.
I heard Austin's like 10 days in a row, 100 degrees plus. Is there any truth to
that's
that
nothing. We've been like 100 degrees plus for like since May. So, for like a good 6 weeks.
Well, you know, that's what happens when you're in hell.
Wow. Way to pander to all of our Texan fans.
Oh, that's right. Your mom's in Texas. I forgot.
Yeah, my mom was going to be so sad about that comment.
Is your mom excited that she's like a star here on the show?
She's so excited. She loves when she gets a shout out. I get a text message. She's thrilled.
For real?
She's thrilled.
For real?
For real. Yeah, for real. For real. Yep.
And
she's our one listener.
And your dad's still pretty proud of the Reds conversation, although I'm sure he was somewhat disappointed that his daughter couldn't remember what
it was a combination of pride and disappointment, which that's about par for the course.
There you
so.
go. Well, that's the whole point of having kids, to be proud and disappointed all at the same time.
Yep, exactly.
All right, Jess, what are we talking about today?
I want to talk about structuring a pipeline today.
Structuring a pipeline or building a pipeline, both?
Both.
Pipeline?
I think we're going to touch both. Yeah, let's talk about building and structuring an oil pipeline on the RevOps Show. I'm sure everybody will be super entertained by that conversation.
You know what J. Paul Getty said were the 3 secrets to getting rich? Said he had a fail-proof 3-step plan to becoming rich beyond your wildest dreams.
What is that plan?
He said, first, wake up early.
Okay.
Second, work hard.
I'm screwed.
Work hard. Screwed again. Third, and this could be your shot, strike oil.
I am in Texas, so maybe
get up early, work hard, strike oil.
Okay.
That was his 3-part plan.
I'm gonna start working on that right after I get the pause button figured out.
So data is the new oil. I don't really know what that means, but
okay. Wow, we are fully off the rails. Not even 5 minutes in. Great. I want to talk about structuring.
You need to bring a little bit more discipline and control. You're supposed to be the host here. I'm supposed to be the provocateur.
I am.
You're supposed to be prepared.
That's what they tell me. That's what I'm never prepared for this. Never prepared for this. I want to talk about structuring a sales pipeline.
Let's do
That's
it.
what I want to talk about. Okay. I was going to ask you where we start, but I get the same answer to that every time. We land in the same place, which is map your business process. So once you've taken that first step of mapping your business process,
Actually, you know
where do
what?
you start?
You know what, Jess?
Oh, oh,
Someone asked me today, do I naturally just take the other side of everything, or? And I said, yeah.
you know, I had a thought about taking that approach that you were gonna just totally contradict me. So let's go.
So in some ways, the structuring your pipeline, defining your pipeline is part of mapping your business process. So, um, like I could see as part of the mapping process,
Hmm.
I think that you could, depending upon where you're comfortable, where you're coming from, you could start at the pipeline and then work into what are the inputs into the pipeline and out of the pipeline. Um, or you could start with just the overall flow, as we've talked about, and we'll probably do an
Yep.
episode on at some point. Um, but yeah, so go ahead. What was your question? I don't even remember what your question was.
Where do you start? Like, how do you start? I don't have a defined sales pipeline. How do I
Oh,
start
really?
by
So
structure?
you
Like, how do
asked
I
me
start
where do
putting
we
some
start?
structure together?
So I thought you asked me where do I start, and I was pretty sure that my answer to where do we start is always the same. But actually, it was. I thought my answer was going to be in the beginning. At the beginning, start at
Yeah,
the beginning.
there's that start at the beginning. That's super
Um,
helpful.
So you got to give me a little bit more than where do we start? I guess where I would start is give me a little bit more. What's the
So I don't have a defined sales pipeline. I want to put one in place for my reps to be able to track progress with their sales opportunities. How do I start putting a structure in place for to track those things?
so just so we're not speaking in coded language or confusing language, we're talking about how do we create a sales pipeline that um to define what are the stages of the pipeline that a deal or opportunity goes through. Correct. And that's what we're talking about.
Yep.
Yep. So
Correct. Yep.
how do we identify and define what our sales stages are? What the stages of our
Yep.
pipeline are? Right.
Yep.
Um, well, you start by mapping your business process, Jess. the,
Oh.
there are, so if you think about the revenue acceleration framework,
Hmm.
this is the structure part of the framework.
Hmm.
The structure is driven by the go-to-market strategy, and key elements of the go-to-market strategy are economic model and sales model. So the go-to-market strategy we talk about is what's the economic model, what's the sales model, what's the messaging, positioning, and holy cow, there's a fourth one, and I can't remember what the fourth item is. But hey, check out the sale notes. Check out the show notes. So it's when I was on a podcast earlier today, and the same question was asked. The topic was about marketing to sales handoffs, and
Hmm.
it was with George GBT, and he asked me, so I'm somebody, I don't have a handoff. Where do I start? And I said, well, that's the wrong. You start with an accurate representation of your current situation, which is to say you don't have say you don't have anything is a mistake. You have something, right? If you've made a sale, you have something,
Right.
and if you haven't made a sale, you have an idea of something. And what I'll share with you is every sales process goes through the same generic steps or the same generic stages, whatever you want to call them. There's a stage of finding. There's a learning stage. There's a planning stage. There's a consideration stage. And then there's an action stage. That's just what everything goes through, right? I have to find you. You have to find me. I learn about what you do. I learn about, and again, learning's interesting. And again, I specifically, with the exception of consideration, sometimes I'll use that term. These are generic terms I never use. I would never use a pipeline stage to call that. It's just understanding that that's the process that people go through. Now, what is interesting, depending upon different companies and what's happening, actually, this is fun as I call this out. Finding and learning, as the seller, the learning happens after finding.
Mm-hmm.
But as the buyer, the learning could happen before finding.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, by design, that could be, I mean, if you think about what product-led growth is about, product-led growth is really built on the idea that I start learning before I start finding. And then in the process of learning, I'm finding. Right. So a very common term for finding is prospecting, discovery, pursuit. Those are things that we use. I find that the way most people use discovery, though, is actually in the learning phase. But so again, so understand, how do those manifest themselves? What I find is that most good pipelines are going to have, at a minimum, I'm going to say 5. I've been thinking about it. You might, in some cases, be able to get it to 4. But I would say that's very much of an exception. But you're going to have 5 stages, and realize that your last stage is decision.
Is that action?
Is
that what? Because I was going to ask you. Okay,
correct.
I was going to ask you what action was. Okay.
And then, I think what you're going to find with some exceptions, a strong pipeline is going to have somewhere between 5 and 9 stages. What you want to do is really begin to break down what are the key inflection points. So, and I'll tell you why I like 5 stages too, as a general theme, is it aligns with, one of my favorite metaphors when it comes to sales, Jess. Right. Texas Hold'em.
The swing path?
No,
Texas Hold'em.
No, swing path has 3 points.
Okay.
Right. So think about this. These are the 5. These are the 5 rounds of Texas Hold'em.
Pre-flop, okay. Yep.
Pre-flop, flop, turn, river, and showdown. Right. So pre-flop is first 2 cards. No one knows anything. Everyone knows what 2 cards they have. Right?
Yeah.
You're making a decision. Right? Do I want to play these 2 cards?
Yep.
Flop, first 3 community cards come up. Round of actions. Turn, next card, 4th community card comes up. River, final community card comes up. Showdown, everyone's got access to the 5 community cards. There are 2 cards. Anyone left? If anyone's made it to that point. And so what you find is, at each step, the game changes, or the kind of levels, angles, whatever there's a material change. It is an inflection point. So what you're looking at is what, where are the inflection points? So the swing path is a great analogy. There's 3 points in the swing path, and everything that you're doing between there, is about to get your hands in the bat in the right place at the right time to increase that probability. So where are the critical points? Right. So point number 1 is, have we found you? Have you found us? And really what you're looking for here is, intrigue, engagement, and fit.
Yep.
What you're looking at is, I mean, this is your pre-flop, right? You don't have detailed knowledge. You're not seeking detailed knowledge. You're seeking, positioning. How does this look? Is this worth spending more time in? The learning area is where, I mean, some people will call it discovery. Some people will call it qualification. Some people will call it needs assessment. I often will call it diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Here we're defining the problem. Now, this is a place where I'll oftentimes add a step depending upon the complexity of the sale, the size of the sale, the consideration level of the sale, how much inertia is in place, how much change am I looking for, is I might combine the problem stage, defining the problem and what's its cause, what's the cost. Or I might even break it into 2 stages, which is defining the problem, then defining the cost of the problem. Right. Then there's a planning stage. That planning stage is, I'm typically going to, one of my favorite terms is solution design. There's a design phase where, in the problem phase, we're defining what the problem is. Now we're defining what the solution needs to be. What is the solve going to be? Here's, an important element where I think people get lost is they think about themselves as the solution, right? What I talk about, and one of the reasons why I like solution design phase, and there's really 2 ways that you're going to do solution design. One phase is going to be, you're a services offering, you're a custom offering, you're literally determining, there's at least a little bit of co-creation that's happening because what you do for one is different from another, which tends to be in true services places where we're designing what your solution is, what your solution is going to be. The other element could be more of a product element. So like this drives me crazy because I saw somebody yesterday on LinkedIn talk about selling services, and their example of selling services was SaaS. And I decided, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to comment on this anymore. But what I wanted to tell them was SaaS is not a service. It's selling software. It's buying software as a service, which is the ongoing.
But service is in the name, Doug.
But
service is in the name.
That's about the business model, not because, if I'm selling, let's just, pick our favorite SaaS company. If I'm selling HubSpot, Marketing Hub Enterprise is Marketing Hub Enterprise is Marketing Hub Enterprise. Right.
Right.
It's not going to change in this case. So like, and whereas, what we do, we have different elements and different programs. There is much more of a, co-creation element to what's there. So in that product oriented sale, it's figuring out what elements of.
Right.
And what you're doing is this is the transition. This stage is the transition from understanding the problem to presenting your product or service as the best alternative. What this planning stage is it's the objective solution. Understand your product is not a solution. A solution by definition is brand agnostic. You're a methodology. You are an alternative for the solution, but you're not the solution. So if this is the problem, what has to happen to solve the problem, right? That typically gets manifested in the form of a proposal, a presentation, or something along those lines that then moves into a consideration or adjustment or negotiation that then moves into a final decision phase, which then can trigger a whole bunch of things. And so whatever you're doing, you're going through those steps. Like that is the journey of a decision involving a product or service. So you're gonna look to those elements. And then I'm a big believer that words mean things. You want the word for the stage to be, I mean, it's the area, I find so many people just miss this. It is the place where you get to bring behavioral science to your side. You get to nudge. You get to, because when I say solution design, by calling it that, I'm without saying anything, I'm saying that you're going through a configuration. You're not just right. If I say presentation or proposal, then I'm thinking, okay, jump to proposal, right? And so I will probably get into mistakes, but you're looking at what are the key inflection points. And by the way, like, so on one hand, I hate the way that modern sales has taken CRM stages and said stage 1 is worth 5%, stage 2 is worth 15%, probability stage 3. Right? While on one hand, I hate that, right? And the reason I hate it is because the stage is really not the key indicative. What is true is each stage should articulate a milestone that by crossing that milestone, there is a higher probability of winning your hand than there was before that.
Yep.
And so where does the probability shift? At what point, when it crosses this threshold, we either know it's out or it's more likely. That's how you begin to identify where those points are. And so if you're in a crazy complex all over the place, you're going to have more stages because it's like sailing a boat in a storm. You're going to tighten your waypoints. You're going to have more waypoints along the way. If I'm in smooth waters and it's clear and et cetera, then I can extend the waypoints out. I don't need to be, those inflection points aren't as many or don't need to be as close because I'm not going to be so far off course. But what stages should do is to prevent you from being too far off course that you can't course correct without suffering significant cost or loss.
So that's why you'd have more stages in a more complex sale, less stages.
And what I should say is in a more complicated sale.
Okay. I knew as soon as complex came out of my mouth. Who should you involve? Like, so as you're kind of defining these inflection points and putting the pipeline stages in place, who should be involved in that? Should it be the sales reps? Should it be the VP of sales? Do you want to get marketing involved? Do you want to get RevOps involved? Like who should be at the table as you're mapping that process out?
Who should be contributing or who should be creating? Well,
those are two different questions. Let's start with who should be contributing. Who should be contributing to
everybody?
What do you mean by everybody?
Salespeople should be contributing. If I'm doing a real full design, I want to talk to salespeople and I want to hear what's happening. I want them to walk through sales that they've won. I want them to walk through sales that they've lost. I'm not asking them what stages do you want. I'm asking them to walk through, and I'm digging in, and what I'm looking for are patterns. Right? People throw around the word scale all the time when it comes to growth, and no one knows not no one, but the percentage of people who use the word scale and know what it means, I don't think is very high. And so I finally saw a definition to scale that I actually really like. Scaling is repeatability for greater profit.
Okay, yeah.
So scaling means there's greater predictability. Like scaling means that you're able to do things with more ways. Like, people say we scaled from 10 people to 300. No. You hired 290 more people. You spent more money. What you scaled from 10 to 300 when the 300th employee was more profitable than the 200th employee, and it could be from any more productive, your underlying cost structure, right? So you're generating more juice for the squeeze with less mystery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what, so I was talking to somebody yesterday and today that just a friend who was talking about, I feel, I still don't really have a documented sales process, but I'm the only person that's selling. And I'm like, and by the way, I think, very, very small company, right? I'm like,
right.
The last thing you need is a documented sales process. As a matter of fact, what I told him was, I said, the worst thing you could do is to document your sales process, because if you documented your sales process, you'd start thinking about your sales process in the wrong way.
Right.
And you wouldn't gain anything about it. You don't, they're not in a position to scale. So to some degree, to a large degree, like this conversation doesn't mean, like, they shouldn't be listening to this episode. So what, I see people going, well, what do you think the stages are? No, I don't want to. By the way, when I'm doing, if we're doing a full sales team, sales process, sales structure design, what we're going to do is we're going to do some mapping, and we're going to talk about flows. We're going to talk about it in a very generic way, because I want to get you, we talk about the business process has to drive the technology, right? The business process has to drive the sales pipeline. Right. And so let's get a picture of what is our underlying flow? What is the underlying journey? What is our hypothesis? Where do we identify those key components, key inflection points? And while, the 5 steps that I talked about are the same, like they're always there, how they manifest themselves, what the path looks like, what's the horizontal, what's the vertical, they're all very, very dependent. The other thing I'm listening for is language, because I want to cue. Again, the words that I use, what I label things, is going to cue what behavior.
Yeah.
Right. If I say demo, then everyone's going to run to demo. Right. And it's like, hey, let me say demo. Right. If I say solution design, you're going to do something completely different.
Right. Yeah, and it's fascinating too, because I don't think that we get a more visceral reaction to anything that we outline as much as we do on pipeline stages. People just have a so if it's and rightfully so, because of what you said, because sometimes you'll use a word or a term that means something totally different internally within the organization. It's like, no, we can't call it that, and like. So it is so important what you name those stages.
So I think that you've got that. I think another reason why we get a lot of visceral pushback is that when you define the stages in certain ways. And so, by the way, when I say demo, the threshold, the expectation, the effort required from a selling organization is one level. If I say solution design, it's a distinctly different level. Right. So some people don't like to use the word design in it because they actually have a design offering. Right. And so they don't want to get, and so again, so we can find another word. But like, and it's funny, like I thought actually you were going to talk about our response to should demo be a stage. And the funny thing is, there's one cohort of people who are like, number one fan club. Finally, somebody says demo shouldn't be a stage. Another group is like, what do you mean that, like, if we don't demos right? And they don't realize that whether it's the name of the stage or not doesn't increase or diminish its importance. It's that
demo's a thing you do. It's not a stage. And
so that's one of the key lessons is never confuse. And I see this happen all the time. And this is like, I saw a 17 stage pipeline, right?
Oh yeah, I have too.
And what it was 17 activities.
There's been several of those where I'm like,
pipeline stage
these
meaning
4
scheduled.
activities in a stage.
Pipeline stage meaning scheduled. Pipeline stage meaning held. Okay, that's because by the way, here's the other problem. So the meeting's scheduled, the meeting's held, and it's clear that this is not a fit. So it goes to closed loss. Well, did it go to closed loss from like what?
Well, I
again,
saw one where they had a no show stage,
well,
and it's like, okay, and then so they're like, okay, well, we're trying to rebook, and I'm like, okay, and then the opportunities like going back and forth like ping pong. It's insane. It's insane.
well, and now one pushback that I got from somebody was, well, I've got to, we've got to be able to track, what's it taking to get from meetings. I'm like, okay, that's the configuration of your CRM. That's not your, but the other thing that I asked too was, I said, well, from talking to your salespeople, typically they're gonna have 7 to 9 meetings to make a sale, but you only have one meeting stage. So when they're dead, right, and so that's where. So, but again, that's where you're thinking about it as, it's why people hate when you talk to sales sides and they get a negative visceral reaction when we talk about process, because they view process as restraining. That's an example of a restraining process, as opposed to, if you view it as, what are the key milestones to creating a customer?
Yep.
And that's where, like, we actually go, and I'm a big fan of, if we actually have 2 distinct pipeline phases, which is we have a pre-sales opportunity pipeline, which is what our market development reps work from, and sales development works from, because they're generating a bona fide sales qualified opportunity, right? And there are milestones to that, and it really is, we don't use the same names for the stages at all, but if you look at it, it's still the same 5 steps. Yeah. Right? It's just that what I'm selling is a sales process, if you will. I mean, that's not what you call it out necessarily, but.
So this actually got to one question I had, which is, when are 2 pipelines better than 1? 1 or 3 pipelines better than 2?
So what's interesting is what I just said is going to get misinterpreted as 2 pipelines instead of 1, because you could theoretically say that our pre-sales pipeline and our sales pipeline is really 1 pipeline, because the only overlap is the very end of the first pipeline to the beginning of the second pipeline. Right. What we've done is we've broken them up into 2 different pipelines, because they are 2 different business processes. There's a beginning. So for the market development team, this is the beginning, this is the end. And also, by the way, behavioral science. When do salespeople get the greatest dopamine hit?
When they get to move that deal or opportunity to close 1.
Right. And you know what SDRs don't get? They don't get closed 1. Because all they get to do is change the status in a property, right? So we have closed 1, which is SQL for it, or SQA for it, right? That's their closed 1. They get the dopamine hit. They get to see it. They get to see it built up in just like again. So there's a psychology there, but then in our sales pipeline, we have 3 pipelines, right? That cover the same process, and I'll give you the I'll give you the dominant 2. Actually, I'll give you the dominant. I'll give you 3 of the pipelines that we have. So 1 pipeline is for our projects. 1 pipeline is for ongoing programs, recurring retainer programs. And then we have a 3rd pipeline that we referred to it. It got it started, and so it's still called the add-on pipeline, but it's actually used a little bit more for that. Now, our add-on pipeline has 3 stages. So I guess I'm violating my my 5 stages, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so first off, so let's do the project pipeline and the ongoing services pipeline. They're distinctly different sales motions. In a project, and a typical project that we're doing is a tech implementation, HubSpot implementation. It's a very defined issue. It's a very defined set of elements. As an example, our solution design phase is called scoping. Right? It is a scoping process. Now, on our ongoing programs, it's called solution design, right? And as a matter of fact, when people ask for a scope, I say, well, can I see a scope for your job? Well, the scope for their job is their job description, right?
Right.
Okay, because it's designed to be variant, so you can't scope it in the same way. It's designing what that solution is. It's by the way, our recurring pipeline has a stage for defining the cost of the problem. So we do separate that diagnosis phase really into two steps, right? And so what you see there are distinctly different motions, right? So the way we sell projects and the way we sell recurring are not the same. And what we'll get to for things that should be in it and how you define what your pipe, where your stages are, is they have different exit criteria. Now there's some overlap between the two, but there's distinctly different criteria. Our add-on pipeline is a much simpler pipeline, and that is because by the time they get to us, the finding and the learning has already happened. So it could be, hey, I want to talk about adding 5 more people to the sales coaching program.
Right.
Well, we're as part of our ongoing delivery of services, we're advising on that, right? But it is an opportunity that we've got to track. So it doesn't have the same, so like the solution's already been designed. It's the program that's already in place. And now it's our ability to track, how many of those opportunities are generated. It has a very, very different motion with very, very different people involved. It's got different timing elements. It's also now come to be our rep assisted product pipeline. Because again, so like our business acumen for sales, our deal selling courses, where someone comes in, it is again a much simpler. I talked about solution design for product. We don't do solution design for our business acumen course. Our business acumen course is our business acumen course, right? And so it's a very different conversation. It is very much rep assisted, which by the way I would say is very similar. If you want to apply it to technology, it's very similar to a PLG sale. So if I've got a rep directed motion versus a rep assistant motion, those should not be in the same pipeline because they are different business processes. They're parallel because they're covering the same ground in your acquisition, right? They're the new customer. In some cases, we'll also add and expand. So by the way, our add-on kind of became our expand pipeline, except we're not expanding in the defined element of expand. If we're saying, hey, we want to bring a new offering or extend, an offering that they don't have, we would move that into either our project pipeline or our recurring pipeline because it's the same motion. But if you have a land expand business, then your land expand strategy, then your land motion is going to be different than your expand motion, because your expand motion is actually directly fishing, working within your install base, within your customer base to move forward. It's got different motions to it. The only place where you could have similar motion where I would tend to fall towards separating the pipelines. And by the way, there's a reason why people struggle with separating pipelines. And it's funny. You can always tell the Salesforce people from the first CRM anyone ever had was HubSpot, because on the first CRM was HubSpot, what you typically see is someone who's got 17 pipelines. We have the Jim pipeline and the Frank pipeline.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, why do you have a Jim pipeline and a Frank pipeline? Well, because they're two different salespeople. Well, they sell the same thing. They're the same state, right? That's too many pipelines gone wrong. But the reason that there was this belief to begin with that there should only be one pipeline was because the systems that existed only enabled one pipeline. So you had to make no. In fairness, that's some of why you began to go to your activities, because you had different motions, but you were only allowed one pipeline to track it. So you went to your lowest common denominator. But going to where there could be a very similar motion where I could see myself going to two distinct pipelines or more than one pipeline is if the if the velocity or the complexity was materially different. So if I'm selling the same set of services to enterprise that I'm selling to small, it might technically have the same stages,
Mm-hmm.
but the velocity of those pipelines, the time, like, sales cycle times,
Is
etc.,
that
would be distinctly different. And so depending upon what other motions are, it enables me, by separating them, it makes it easier for me to get some signal and analytics, harder to get others. So it begins to go to what I begin to look at second degree elements as to whether or not you should begin to separate those pipelines.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, if it would skew the numbers. So is that one trade-off? If you are breaking that up into two pipelines, you lose some functionality with tracking and analytics and reporting, or
not really. If you configure it correctly, there's some visualization, some simple visualization that you lose.
yeah.
You don't lose anything. It's a question of what needs an added bit of configuration and support to get. So if I have two different pipelines, I've got to do an added work to be able to get to view them as one. If I have one pipeline, I have to do added work to be able to get the right signal if I want to view them as two. So if I'm trying to get a feel for what's my enterprise velocity, or what does my enterprise side look like versus my SMB side,
Yep.
which one do I want to go to more easily? Which one? And by the way, where you need more config, more support, it also means that it's more likely that someone will be looking for something and they'll make a mistake because they'll miss that little nuance. And so they might not actually be looking at the right data. Again, you don't technically lose anything. It's more a question of what becomes more intuitive and a little bit easier. And also they're like another reason that, so let's say that I had, and I'm not a fan of the same person selling to enterprise that sells to SMB, but if I had the same person selling enterprise and SMB, I would probably move more towards, and it's the same underlying motion, that
Mm-hmm.
would probably move me more towards single pipeline. If I've got distinctly different teams, that's going to move me more likely to separate pipelines, because now there's more noise in right, and so again, all those things kind of come in. That's where we get into the nuance, and there's some again, behavioral nudging to that and so forth.
Yep. You hit on this a little bit because you talked about exit criteria, but what are the other things that you should consider outside of just stages, as far as pipeline structure and making sure that you have the right tracking, the right functionality for the reps to be able to track and do what they need to do?
So I think what you need to do is you need to find, I can't remember how many categories it is. Count it, and when we're done, tell me how many it is. So you have a stage. You need to answer the question: what's the purpose of each stage? What's the objective? What job is this stage doing? Right. That communicates the intent. The next thing you should be doing is, and in this stage, what's happening in the customer's world? What are they doing? Where are they? What are they thinking? What actions are they taking? What's happening? Then on our side, what are we doing? What actions are we taking? What are we thinking? What's happening on our side? The exit criteria, which is to say, at each stage, what has to happen for us to consider us past the first milestone. So this is where pipelines get people into trouble as well. And I was actually telling George today, I am calling it a buying journey less and less. I'm certainly calling it a purchasing journey less and less. It's more of an odyssey, right? Everybody takes a different path. That's a good word, isn't it, to describe it?
It's a sales odyssey.
It is.
This is amazing.
Right? And so, like, as an example, authority, talking to, you've got the right authority that's there. That's rarely a requirement in a first stage or in a super early stage.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
But what if I'm talking to the to the top dog. That the first person I talked to is the top dog. Guess what? That criteria has been met. Right. So again, I can be through the first stage, having gotten some of the things in later stages. Someone says, I want a proposal. You might have an exit criteria of intent to buy. That could be an exit criteria. In my first conversation, you tell me you want a proposal. Okay, intent to buy is marked. Now what happens that I see salespeople do is they tend to define where a sale is in its process by the stimulus that is closest to the end.
I was about to go there. I was like, well, if I have an authority figure and that's an exit criteria for the last stage, I can just right. skip all the way to there, right?
And by the way, the number of times I hear something, well, look, they're asking for a proposal. Okay, but we don't even understand what their problem is yet. Well, you know what? They're asking for a proposal, and we don't. If someone wants to buy, you don't want to upset them.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens is, by the way, in your exit criteria, what you're now doing is you're now giving the full map with a nudge. It does a whole bunch of coaching on its own for what are the components, what needs to happen for the sale. That's where. So demo is an exit criteria. Right. All those activities, meeting scheduled could be an exit criteria. I tend to think it's kind of inferred, but, and you're going to track your meeting elements differently. But by the way, I might have, we do have in some cases, first meeting profile completed. Now, you know what's funny about that? Sometimes it takes 4 or 5 meetings to complete the first meeting profile. Right. But anyway, right. So you're identifying those criteria, and a stage doesn't move from stage 1 to stage 2 until all the exit criteria of stage 1 are met. Right. And by the way, so I might be in stage 1 having met all of the criteria of stage 2 before I meet all the criteria of stage 1. And so when that last criteria of stage 1 is met, I now go to stage 3. Now, when you do this, now the probability of each stage really is higher. The reason that your stages before are not higher, like the traditional approaches, 98 times out of 100, if I look at a pipeline that doesn't have exit criteria, steps are skipped.
Oh yeah,
we're missing things. And or they're not assessed. Because by the way, that profile is completed. Okay, what's that profile telling us? There's profile that tells us this is high fit. Oh my God, they have acute issues. They are, I know at step 2 they're a high probability. Like I have people at step 2 that have a higher probability in our forecasting than I have in the final stage, post proposal, etc. It's the exit criteria and those components that determine that. Then there's, what else happens? Who in the organization is impacted at each stage? What actions need to happen at each stage? So this is how we get sales and marketing orchestration. So you begin to identify this, and now we have orchestration that's working along the lines of that path. And this truly does become instructional. It becomes prescriptive, and it becomes predictive.
So I've got 4 categories. What job is the stage doing?
5.
Okay, so what's the 5th one?
What's triggered?
Okay, gotcha. What's triggered?
What's happening on our back end? We have some cases. Okay. The estimate team has to start. The assessment team comes in. That's where when we're implementing in HubSpot, we'll actually use tickets to manage that back end service.
Yeah.
See, one of the other things about the pipeline, and when you don't do it this way, it's a problem, is we're so focused on the front stage aspect of sales, the friction between the buyer and the seller. It sucks up so much oxygen in the conversation that we don't realize that 70% of the friction, 70% of the shit that gets in the way is internal. Because we're not coordinated. Right. And by the way, when you win the business and operations goes, we didn't know this was coming, or we didn't know that was the case, where you're now able to identify, what's what, where's this, or sales says, why did marketing send this? Well, we didn't know.
Right. Yep. Yep. So where do pipelines fail? Like, what are the mistakes that people make with pipe? I mean, we talked about not having defined exit criteria forces steps
Yeah.
missed,
So
but
so the biggest mistakes are they're too rigid. They don't support um, infinite paths and styles.
so that's the use case of doesn't support if I've got some exit criteria from stage 4, but I'm still in stage 1, I'm not able to really effectively track account for. Okay.
Well, so rigid would be, like the 17-step pipeline is a very rigid pipeline. It um
Okay, gotcha.
Jess, you've gone totally off camera. Just FYI, people see basically your ear. Um, no, now you're good. When you were leaning over,
I
you were
was
off
still,
camera.
oh no, I was still showing on camera on mine. Okay.
Well, okay, so but in just so you know, in terms of the view here, like you'll see. Don't worry, everyone we're using a new, we're testing something new out here. Um, so too rigid, too linear.
Okay.
Um, another, mistaking activities for stages. Too vague, too broad, too meaningless. You can think of a couple. Um, the
So Goldilocks is what we're looking for.
you know in a separate conversation and separate content we talk about forecast confidence. I think a mistake is, to me, the stage and the probability um, are very, very different things. Now, I do think someone in stage 4 should have a higher probability than that someone would have in stage 2.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't
Yeah.
mean so company X, if they're in stage 4, should have a higher probability than company X would have in stage 2, right? So it should be weeding out.
Right.
But company Y in stage 2 may have a much higher probability than a much higher forecast confidence than company X in stage 4. There's also an element to timing, right? So this might have a higher probability, but higher probability doesn't answer when, and so there's I see people way overestimate how fast things are going to happen. That leads to bad forecasting. And so what ends up happening is we play the 3x coverage. We talk about pipeline coverage. We say, as long as I've got 3x my number, then I'm going to be fine. And what it doesn't account for, when you do that, you end up focusing on lower quality pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
So again, how you're measuring this, how you're judging this is important. How you set up your analytics. So whenever we do win rate analysis, we always do them by N and by revenue. So N is number of opportunities, right? So I had 20 opportunities come in. I won 5 of them. That's a 25% win rate, right? That's the N rate. The revenue rate is those 20 opportunities represented $1 million. And our 5 wins represented $100,000. So I had a 10% win rate. I had 25% N, 10% revenue, or those 5 opportunities represented $350,000. I had a 25% N win rate and a 35% revenue win rate. And by the way, one of the things you'll also begin to find, and this could lead to different pipelines, is you might find that the motions at revenue opportunities shift. What's involved to win a larger deal is different than what's involved to win a smaller deal. And I see this very often. Everyone is either always overselling or underselling because they only have one path. And so I might be making it, harder for this one and too easy for that one, or doing too much on this one, but too little on that one, so on and so forth. So it really is, again, not tying the pipeline to the underlying motion, to the underlying business process. If I'm making chairs and I'm making ovens, I don't hear anyone trying to say, well, we need to combine those processes. Look, everybody, I just want to get one set. I want to use the same raw materials. I want to use the same manufacturing line. I want to use the same process. Like no one would think about that.
Right.
Right. But, you know, my small business to, you know, all those things that, you know, we're trying to unify. Well, okay, you should unify where it's unified. Right. So
Sure.
again, the business process has to drive. That's the biggest mistake, is that it doesn't.
All right. I think that is a great place to stop. And I think that's a great takeaway. I had a couple others. As far as when you're outlining the structure, make sure you define your inflection points. Make sure that your stages are actually stages and not just activities that would fall under those stages. And then those 5 categories of defining what's the job of the stage, what's happening for the prospect, what's happening for us, exit criteria, and what's triggered within each stage. These are kind of my key takeaways. And we didn't get to everything, so we might have a part 2. Yeah, I knew you'd be excited about that.
Nothing I like talking more. And it's actually probably true. I love talking sales pipeline. Alrighty, on that note, don't miss the next RevOps show.
Thanks, everybody.